Welcome everyone to our webinar today on achieving economies of scale in the Nigerian solar value chain. My name is Hadley Taylor. I'm the project manager leading SEforALL's policy and regulatory frameworks work. And on behalf of myself and my team, we would like to thank you for your interest in taking time out of your Friday afternoon to join us today. So as the logons still come in, allow me to just go over a bit of housekeeping. So as you'll see, we have a packed agenda today that we're going to do our very best to keep time and to get through. Please feel free to post your questions in the chat function throughout the webinar so the SEforALL team can collect them and feed them through to the speakers during the Q&A session. Please, in your question, make sure you also state your name and organization, so that way, if we don't get to all the questions today, we can also follow up via email. So with that, I would like to introduce our opening remarks speakers. First, I'd like to start with the Managing Director of the Rural Electrification Agency in Nigeria, Engineer Ahmad Salehi. Thank you, MD. Please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hadley, and thank you very much, the Chief Executive Officer of the SEforALL, Mrs. Ogumbi, for inviting me to this very, very important webinar on achieving economies of scale in the Nigerian solar value chain. I mean, it's been quite a journey for a year now since Dami herself was here. And I do want to use this platform to appreciate all the support that I've received from Dami in moving together this agenda of renewable energy for all in a country like Nigeria. We've been making a lot of progress, and I'm happy that our friend Dr. Weber as well is also online, who of course always gives us all the support that we need. Even recently, we had to call on his expertise to come and help us with the 5 million solar home systems program. So I would like to use this opportunity to greet everyone. Good day, good afternoon, or good evening from depending on what part of the world that you're in. And I'm delighted to be here today to engage productively on this very, very timely conversation. For a lot of us, the constant interface with the unserved and underserved have given us an idea of the impact of data-driven deployment of renewable energy infrastructure at scale. At the REA for the past year, and in fact the last few months, we've had the privilege of commissioning some of our projects and the impact those projects have been making in the rural areas. I mean, it cannot be overstated. You could see the joy in people's faces when you take them electricity for the first time. This is why it is pivotal to continue to participate in these sort of engaging conversations. Not only to share ideas, but to prefer knowledge-driven solutions. So I therefore really commend the SEforALL, as well as other critical partners who have put this event together. I really like to participate in these events because it usually serves as a learning for all organizations to see how experiences can be drawn from different parts of the world, where we can all put these ideas together and ensure that we have better designed programs. So as you may recall, about a year ago, His Excellency, President Muhammadu Buhari, the President of Nigeria, established the Economic Sustainability Committee, which was in response to the unprecedented health and economic challenge posed to us by the COVID-19. Shortly after that, the REA as well, in its own way, also went ahead and started some deployment of hybrid solar mini grids for isolation centers, which we've been able to do 4 so far, and we are able to now do more within this coming year in partnership with various international development agencies. However, the speedy efforts of that committee culminated into 2.3 trillion naira into the economic sustainability plan that aims to mitigate the effects of deep recession while ensuring social stability and addressing long standing economic vulnerabilities. So in recognition of the crucial role that the power sector plays in this plan, the nation's climate ambition and overall social and economic development objectives, the Solar Power Naija program was launched to serve about 25 million Nigerians by 2023 through the solar home systems and the solar mini-grids. And I'm very happy that my colleague Suleiman Babamanu is on the call today and would be able to give us additional information. He's the technical lead for the 5 million solar home systems program, also known as the Solar Power Naija program, and he would give us more information on this. With particular supervision from the Federal Ministry of Power, the program is currently being implemented by ourselves through the World Bank funded NEP project as well. So we thought it was important to maintain the economies of scale. So we have the World Bank subsidy through the NEP also feeding into this particular program, so that throughout the value chain, we have those grants and subsidies also being channeled towards rural electrification. And of course, this is supported by the CBN facility of a concessionary debt financing window of 140 billion. So before the COVID-19 hit us, critical stakeholders in the industry have continued to create a sustainable framework for the solar PV industry in Nigeria through provision of best-in-class geospatial data for the solar home systems and the mini-grid companies. And I'll use this opportunity to also commend the SEforALL for providing us with support in the 5 million solar home systems, where we've actually worked with the SEforALL team to identify up to 7 million unserved and underserved areas that are going to benefit from this Solar Power Naija program. With that, we also have some intelligence for upstream localization of the solar value chain. So in this breath, I also want to use this opportunity to commend other development partners in supporting this process. So the USAID Power Africa, the UK NIAF, STA, ASTAF, and GIZ. So there are a lot of opportunities to expand this market to make it more viable and achieve the desired objectives. Working with private developers, we deployed more mini-grids and solar home systems in the year 2020 in the heat of the pandemic to support the healthcare sector, which is urgent energy needs, plug into more communities and energize the underserved. So as we continue to open up the renewable energy market, using viable business models to deploy mini-grids and solar home system solutions, I really cannot overstate how critical it is that key enablers such as the technical assistance, market data, technology transfer are capable of. So these are all areas that are extremely important for us to be able to have this market sustainable and be able to have programs that actually make sense. Part of what I've been doing at the area is to ensure that we have every program is fully sustained, especially with private sector participation. So without all these things, I don't think we are actually able to achieve some of our objectives. So on that note, I seize this opportunity to thank you all for the unwavering support and implore us to continue to do more, given the magnitude of the challenges that we're trying to solve. And I thank you, and I look forward to fruitful deliberations today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, MD, for those opening words. I'd now like to hand it over to Dr. Wiebe Boer, the CEO of ALL-ON and a funder of SEforALL and this work. Over to you, Wiebe.
All right, thank you very much, Hadley. On behalf of ALL-ON and our investor Shell, I'd like to just say a special welcome to the CEO of SEforALL, Damilola Ogunbiyi, and also the MD of REA, Ahmad Salehiju, who we just heard from. Essentially, the two of them are my bosses. So it's an honor to be on the same platform with them. I'd also like to welcome everyone on our distinguished panel, as well as our virtual audience from all over the world. And I'm seeing messages pop up from Guatemala, from all sorts of places. So this is actually really exciting that this is now an international conversation that we can have. So it's hard to believe that exactly a year ago, before COVID-19 morphed into a global pandemic, SEforALL and All On had a brainstorming session about how to get around the barriers against achieving economies of scale. Shortly after, COVID-19 became a full-fledged pandemic that shook supply chains around the world, and specifically our sector here in Nigeria, exposing the weaknesses we all knew existed and feared could devastate economies. We had a worst-case scenario on our hands. Although no one imagined just how disruptive the pandemic would become to supply chains and how long it would be such, thus began the SEforALL and All On collaboration, which was then complemented by the federal government's ambitious Solar Naija initiative with its plan to light up 5 million households across Nigeria. I'm particularly proud of this work and what we've all accomplished working together, and to see that we've now come full circle so that we can now launch this together and make available the documents, the tools, and analysis that the team from SEforALL has put together with their painstaking work. And so that we can now, find a way to work together to bring the supply chain here to Nigeria, bring costs down, and make solar more accessible and affordable to the average Nigerian and eventually the average African. So I'm particularly looking forward to what I imagine will be a very engaging panel discussion today. First of all, because we've assembled a first-class group of subject matter experts who are incredibly qualified to drive this conversation and to talk about the frameworks, the regulatory barriers, and all of the issues that we have to keep in mind before we can scale. And secondly, we're honored to have as our moderator, Mr. Frank Agbogan, who's the publisher of Business Day, and as he likes to say, he introduces himself as a journalist, but he's definitely Nigeria's preeminent business journalist, and so it's a real honor to have Frank be the moderator with us today. So with that, I'd like to welcome our participants again, like to welcome all the people joining from all over the world, and look forward to a very, very productive engagement as the first step towards making solar accessible to Nigerians.
Thank you very much, Biba. I'll now pass over to who is also my boss, Damilola Ogunbi, who is calling in from Nigeria today. As many of you know, she is the CEO and the Special Representative to the Secretary General of the United Nations and co-chair of UN Energy. And Damilola, the floor is yours to set the scene and present the work that SEforALL has been doing in this space.
Okay, thank you very much. But first, I would like to start thank the REA, of course, not just for allowing this type of work to go on, but the innovation he has brought to the REA since I've been there, and the focus and energy on youth, because now I'm not a youth, that is put into the role. It's truly remarkable if we think of just what REA has achieved during a major pandemic, and it's something that should be very, very commendable. So thank you, MDREA. And for them taking the time to even be here with us today on Friday, when I know what that role is like and all the different things that he has to do and the challenges. Also, obviously, thank you to Dr. Weber for understanding that this was a very, very important topic for Nigeria. It's important for government to lead the way as REA is doing so, but other private sector and development partners to all come together. And I don't want to repeat what everybody else has said in the opening remarks, but I think that's what the unique time for this opportunity is. People always say, what is the opportunity in Nigeria? We want things to do with renewable energy, but what we have at the REA is a first-class team that is ready to answer your questions. It is no coincidence that Nigeria is the only country that have actually activated the Nigerian Electrification project. So it's the only country that's actively having an energy access program for the World Bank. And that is because of the team that is also running it. So the subsidies are available, the scalability is available, the data is now available, the funding is available in some sorts. But what needs to happen is how do you scale up? Everybody that knows me knows that I'm not just working in Nigeria because I'm Nigerian, but I'm working in Nigeria because if Nigeria isn't part of the global conversation to end energy poverty, we just won't achieve it. There are about 85 million Nigerians that don't have access to energy now, and they have a government that's determined to make sure that differs. So there are key steps now. We're going to talk about the access to data we've been providing. The REA team technically headed up by Suleiman, has been amazing in terms of pinpointing where these people are. This is saving developers thousands of dollars trying to find where all these things are. And that is the enabling environment the REA, working with SE4ALL, has put in place. The other big part, which the MDREA also spoke about, is the issue of localization and the issue of how do we get assembly and local assembly done here, because we all know that the cost of doing renewable energy in Nigeria is not dropping as fast as it is in other parts of the world, and especially in other parts of Africa as well. So that's really important. And Hadley and the team for SEforALL with Salehi have done amazing work with the REA team to do that. And the third thing is to hear back from you in the private sector. And it shouldn't be, oh, government should do this, government should do that. Government has done a lot over the last 3 or 4 years. You can still say government should do things, but what does the private sector need to do? How does the private sector need to scale up? We still have developers doing 1, 2 mini grids, and now, you know, I'm looking at Ahmad on the screen, and he needs them doing 100. What needs to happen for you to come and do the scale? So when you ask for customs, forex, everything you ask for, there's a big thing that you're pushing for, and you know the REA team can take to other parts of government. They can't take that for powering a few thousand people. You know, they need to take that for powering 1 million people. I feel like all the stars are aligning. I think, you know, the pandemic has shown us that renewable energy and clean energy is the way to go. I think there's now, obviously there's the MDREA, but there's now a team in place to answer your questions and make sure as developers it sails through. We now have funding institutions like AllOn who are willing, if you have the correct documentation, I will stress, to fund you. And we also have banking institutions like the MDREA is here. When they said the CBN thing, I was skeptical, but it's happening. So please, please, please come in this with an open mind, but we need people and developers who's going to scale up the market. And I assure you, and I don't want to speak for the MDREA, that everybody will support you, but we need people to do hundreds of thousands and millions of connections. So again, thank you. Really happy to be here. Really happy to be in Nigeria doing this. And there's so many people to thank that has made this time happen. But I really would love to come back in a year's time where we'll be celebrating, and you know, we'll follow MDREA on Twitter while he's cutting all the tape to all the other mini grids. So thank you for having me, and back to you, Hadley.
Thank you to all the high-level speakers for your opening remarks, and as Damilola mentioned, for your leadership in this sector, and putting a lot of the building blocks in place, be it in policy or finance, to move this forward. And thank you also, you know, Damilola, for setting the scene for us on SEforALL's work in this sector. And that's really what myself and my colleague Adesanloye Adekanye are here to present to you today. So we're happy to be sharing today the results and findings from recent work that SEforALL has been engaged in. As Damilola mentioned, we've been working closely with the REA and supported by AllOn to identify opportunities to leverage economies of scale in the solar value chain in Nigeria. And as was also mentioned, in the course of this work, the Solar Power Naija program was launched, which provided additional impetus to identify how we as SEforALL can support the sector and add value to existing efforts on the ground to address some of these barriers to scale up in the off-grid market. So since we know we have people from all over the world on the line today, I just want to step back a little bit for the benefit of those that aren't as familiar with the market in Nigeria, and talk a bit about the market opportunity. So the country has the largest electricity access gap on the continent, due in large part to its large population. And based off a geospatial least cost assessment that the government conducted in 2019, the government identified that when it comes to electrifying households, solar home systems and mini grids are in fact the least cost solution for an overwhelming majority of these households. And if we zoom out and look at the region more generally, we see that Nigeria's neighbors in the ECOWAS region similarly have huge populations in need of electricity access. And if we estimate a very conservative estimate that 10% of those will be addressed through off-grid solar solutions, well, in fact, we believe it's more, but we'll stay conservative for the purpose of making the point. Even that brings us to a $2.5 billion market. And so beyond the market potential, you've heard about it a few times already now, the federal government's commitment to both electrify 5 million households with off-grid solar solutions, which are solar home systems and mini-grids, while creating 250,000 jobs by incentivizing localization of the value chain, really offers a unique opportunity on the continent to transform the solar sector to meet the electrification needs of Nigerians and even West Africans more generally. And so what we've also heard, there are many of the necessary frameworks in place, both policy, regulatory, you see on the left of the screen here, many of these really important policies that have been put in place as of late, as well as the Nigeria Electrification project that provides output-based financing that helps address affordability barriers. So even with these in place, right now we still see that the market is characterized by diseconomies of scale. We know that it's import dependent and suffers from tariff discrepancies at the port. It's also characterized by many small and medium enterprises, each with their own supply relationships, causing the costs really to remain high for solar components, where in the rest of the world, we see the costs decreasing rapidly. And of course, it can't go unmentioned. Also, with the COVID pandemic, we saw disruptions globally to supply chains, and it became quite clear that import dependency on such an essential good can indeed threaten the very ambitious development and electrification goals in the country. So when we started investigating at SEforALL the value chain for solar products coming into Nigeria, as I mentioned, it overwhelmingly showed that these were imported products. But in our conversations with stakeholders, I think many of which are on the call today, the good news is that many of those companies that are engaged in this sector were very interested in localizing components of their supply chains, especially for those that are vertically integrated. And for the others that aren't, we're very interested in partnering with companies that do offer localized components in order to avoid disruptions and high tariffs associated with importing the finalized solar products and kits. So in order to benefit from economies in scale and efficiencies in the supply chain, the government is proposing a phased approach to accelerate connections and localize the value chain. And there are unique opportunities to leverage the moment in each of these phases. In phase one, which is imminently upon us, there's a dramatic need for accelerated connections to reach that scale. And therefore, the private sector really must leverage existing supply relationships to meet this immediate goal. So here, many stakeholders are looking to savings that can be accrued from aggregate or a bulk purchasing approach. However, exactly how much savings will come from such an aggregated approach is still yet to be empirically proven. And so this is something, an area of work we're looking into at SEforALL. In the past, many aggregate purchasing schemes, they'll collate demand from various distributors, and therefore in the past have run into administrative and sustainability issues. So the empirical evidence is limited, but when we've looked at sister sectors or experience from other countries, as well as some projections offered by our partners, the effect on unit price varies, but it's often coupled also with an increase in quality and energy efficiency of the components. So certainly here, there is more investigation to be done to identify what could be the price decreases that could result from an aggregate purchasing approach. To also support the accelerated deployment under phase 1, it was already mentioned by both the MD and Damilola and Allon, Viva from Allon. SEforALL has been working very closely with the implementation unit in the REA as a first step to identify the households for the program and then empower the private sector to find their potential sites and clients down to a 1 kilometer squared granularity across the entire country and all geopolitical zones. So in doing so, we took what we're calling a waterfall approach to identifying the characteristics of target households under Solar Power Naija. So firstly, we did a comprehensive deep dive into households' discretionary spending and mapped out those that have an ability to pay for minimum tier 2 electricity service. So I think that's important to note that this is not simply a solar lantern or a small solar home system with 1 light bulb. This is minimum tier 2 as per the World Bank's multi-tier framework. And so we modeled this after a 50-watt peak solar home system based on the present market price of the NEP accredited distributors. We then looked at households that, of course, are in need of these electricity services, so those that are off-grid, and excluded those that are within the service territory of existing or planned mini-grids. And then finally, we partnered with a company called Nithio that conducts analyses on creditworthiness of end users to identify households that are considered fast or moderate repairs to ensure that the households that we are identifying as target households are indeed customers that have the ability to pay and the creditworthiness and are a good potential customer from a private sector point of view. So altogether, this brought us to 7 million households, which of course is 2 million over the 5 million target set by the country. And these are all over the country and to be targeted under the Solar Power Naija program and are ready for immediate electrification under the current market conditions. So this was a really exciting finding to understand that this 5 million target is absolutely achievable with private sector and government working hand in hand. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Adesunloye Adekanye to present our findings from the localization analysis for phase 2 and 3 of the program. Over to you, Sunloye.
Thank you very much, Hadley. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. If you permit me, I'm just going to switch off my video for my bandwidth and I can take you through the presentation. So what is localization of the value chain? Localization is simply the assembly and all manufacturing of solar components in Nigeria, or basically the involvement in the upstream activities of the solar value chain. What does the solar value chain look like? The table you see on your screen basically gives us a quick snapshot of the solar value chain. To the left are the upstream components, which basically lends itself to R&D and manufacturing activities. To the right are the downstream activities, which are predominantly sales and after-sales operations. The snapshot is also color-coded. As you can see on the screen, the activities shaded in purple are those conducted abroad. The activities shaded in light blue are those that are well established in Nigeria today. And the activities you see in yellow, which is predominantly where our focus is, these are activities that we see opportunities for local assembly. So why is this important? So let's take a few of these. So first of all, we see skilled and semi-skilled job creation opportunities. Secondly, we also see significant opportunities in areas of female empowerment. Research shows the success of localization efforts in countries that have successfully localized are predominantly driven by women. Bangladesh is a good example of this. And finally, just like my colleague Hadley already mentioned, we can also see improvements in the reduction of the risks that come with supply chain shocks that we currently experience with COVID-19 and we still continue to experience. So once we've established this an opportunity and we've agreed in principle that there are some benefits to a localization program, we sought to answer the natural question, is this even commercially viable? What does it mean to be commercially viable? This just simply means if solar components were assembled or manufactured in Nigeria, could they compete locally with imports? 2, could they compete regionally in the ECOWAS region? And if so, number 3, how do we make them sustainable? As such, we built an economic model that attempts to answer question 1 and 2 on commercial viability and competition locally. And then obviously we made recommendations to provide insights into how we can make this sustainable. The box you see in the top left corner of your screen shows this modeled solar components and scenarios. So we have components such as solar PVs, inverters, battery packs, and we modeled those against importation, assembly, and then local manufacturing. The box you see in the bottom left of your screen shows some of the identified enablers that we gathered in the interview and the research process. Enablers in this context would mean the various levers that influence socioeconomic value. So for example, tariffs, product subsidies, capital structure, cost of financing, and so on and so forth. And then the final box on your right would be the snapshot of the socioeconomic indicators that we have in the model. Now, the model does do more than this. So I would encourage our participants on the call today to go to the SEforALL website to download the model. It has a lot more interesting metrics for you there. Next slide, please. The charts you see on your screen is basically a preliminary result of the model. So as you can see, so if we focus on the middle bar, the orange one that says assembly price, we can see that the assembly price of a locally manufactured or assembled 50-watt peak solar home systems comes in at around $850, which is circa 32% higher than the average price of a similar SHS available in the market today. That doesn't make it viable. So what did we try to do? So we tried to look at the impact of the identified enablers on the price of a solar home system. So the first enabler we looked at was, let's imagine a world where all importation tariffs on solar components were waived. If we do that, we see about a 9% drop in the price of a solar home system. Subsequently, then we looked at the cost of debt. So what happens in a world where we can go from double-digit financing to single-digit financing, say from 12 to 14%, which is typically offered in the market today, to about 5%. We see a further 2% drop in the price of a solar home system. Then we see about another 10% drop if producing plants benefit from larger scale. So they go from a 20 megawatt plant to a 100 megawatt plant. And then finally, we see another 17% drop in the price of a solar home systems if the effective subsidies were applied, which brings us to about a 34% overall reduction in the price of locally assembled SHS system. We also see similar effects on the mini grid side. So the model makes considerations for both solar home systems and mini grids. And we also see similar effects when we apply the enablers we've already identified. So what does this mean? This simply means localization is indeed possible if these enablers are activated, enablers that are predominantly driven by the public sector, but must be supported by the private sector as well. Models are sometimes advertised as an academic exercise, but we do assure you that it's by no means an academic exercise for the companies that you see on your screen. So we have companies such as Oxano, Naseni, Coleman, Ibeto with the batteries, and Herotech, who have begun their localization journey and continue to make their counterpart investments in the sector so as to move it forward. These companies will be requesting the federal government of Nigeria through its agencies to provide a better business environment so they can continue to do business. As such, we have made a few recommendations here. I would like to start with the first one to say the federal government of Nigeria has done a pretty decent job outlining the policies that can galvanize the sector. Our first recommendation is around re-energizing these policies and emphasis on better implementation. For example, we are advocating for waivers on all tariffs for solar components and priority for clearance at the ports. Our second recommendation is obviously around data. Access to geospatial data, as we saw from the presentation from my colleague Hadley, can help the private sector with portfolio planning. It would be interesting if the private sector understood the ability to pay for customers before it even went to those customers. This way they can plan for their portfolios and have better prognosis in their business environment. And of course, there's access to energy audit data. Access to energy audit data doesn't only help in making sales, it also helps in product planning and assembly planning If you understand the energy needs for the market, then you can plan the products for that market. And of course, access to finance, subsidies, and grants. In a market that's predominantly dominated by lower income customers, access to patient capital and subsidies plays a huge role in that sector. Like we saw from the results of the model, we see that products can effectively drop by another 20% in price if there was access to finance and subsidies and grants. And finally, we encourage the private sector to make its counterpart investment in capacity building in both machinery and people. Obviously, there are some risks to the recommendations that we have put forward here today. And to successfully deliver on these recommendations, the federal government, through its agencies, must ensure that one, there's quality assurance verification of localized products through partnerships with internationally recognized accreditors like Lightning Global. Not only for the local market, it also improves Nigeria's export potential. Secondly, ensure consistent application of import duties at the ports, and perhaps a Solar Power Naija secondment at the port to provide guidelines and instructions to port officials. And finally, to ensure that there's clear definition of what it means to have local content and be conscious not to make it too stringent so as not to threaten the acceleration of the off-grid electrification. Thank you. Hadley, over to you.
Thank you, Sonoye, for taking us through that. And so what we've presented today is really a mere snippet of the full breadth of analysis and results that we are launching today. So I really encourage everyone to visit the SEforALL website. You can download a much more comprehensive version of this presentation that we're showing here today, but also, as Sonoye mentioned, the economic model itself, as well as a manual around how to use that. We're making that open source because we want you as the user to be able to forecast different import, assembly, manufacture scenarios so that you yourself can also see the effects on price, jobs, and the breaking points, etc., as Sonoye mentioned. And just because we're presenting here today, it certainly does not mean that the work is done. We as SEforALL are continuing our support both to the REA and partners to contribute to the success of the Solar Power Naija program. We have already begun to distribute the geospatial data to the companies that are applying to be a part of Solar Power Naija through the REA. We're also engaging with financiers, trying to unlock locally denominated working capital that would complement the offer from the CBN. And of course, we continue to engage partners and play an honest broker role to encourage impactful partnerships in the sector. And lastly, through our integrated energy planning team, we're also looking at how integration of clean cooking, as well as cold chain needs to deliver a COVID vaccine, can be integrated into a more comprehensive integrated energy plan. So with that, and with no further ado, I want to pass on to our distinguished panel today, who are going to talk about the dual objectives of the Solar Power Naija program. I will just remind you again to please feel free to, as I think you've been doing this whole time, put your questions in the chat box throughout the panel discussion so we can try and answer as many as possible in the Q&A session. So I will now hand over to our moderator, Frank Agbogun, CEO of Business Day Media, to moderate the panel discussion. And I invite all panelists to turn on your videos if your bandwidth allows. And over to you, Frank. Frank, unfortunately, we can't hear you.
Hello. Oh my goodness. Hello.
We can hear you. Yes, we can hear you now.
You can hear me now.
Yes, go ahead. You're on. You're on.
What an honor for me to be moderator at this distinguished event. I'm delighted we have people, joining us from all over the world: South Africa, Algeria, Zambia, Benin Republic, Guatemala, Central Asia, and of course, all of Nigeria. So this is indeed a global audience that we are addressing this afternoon. I have a wonderful panel Suleiman Babamanu is project lead at Rural Electrification Nigeria. Grace Kramer is a manufacturing advisor Nigeria at the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. Mohammed Wakili is senior energy specialist with the World Bank. Chuks Umez Laura is, of course, our wonder guy who is chief operating officer at Xeno. And of course, Yewande Orla Bende, who is chief executive officer at Solar. And certainly not the least, our friend Shagun Jain, who's commercial director at Rural SPAC. So let me welcome all of you distinguished panelists to this very interesting conversation. We will be examining how to localize value chains while accelerating developments and looking at how indeed to achieve the goal of solar energy for all. My first question this afternoon will, of course, go to Suleiman. And I'd like for you to just provide for us, Suleiman, what the framework is that the Rural Electrification Agency is putting in place to encourage localization of solar value chain. How can we ensure that this does not come at the cost of accelerated connections? Suleiman. And
Thank you very much, Frank.
Keep your response to 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
It's such a big question, though, Frank. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, MDREA. Good afternoon, CEO, SEforALL, and Weber, and everyone, the co-panelists. Thank you very much for having me around. Very happy to be part of this conversation. Yeah, just like you have, the presentation from SEforALL has identified sort of some challenges that needs to be addressed, right? Especially around low-cost debt financing, right, to support the local value chain. The federal government of Nigeria launched the Solar Power Naija program, and this is specifically to address, you know, access to local capital at a low interest rate. On the upstream side, which is the manufacturers and developers of solar value chain, you would find that companies are able to access loans from the CBN at an interest rate between September and February 28, interest rate of just 5%. Of course, beyond that, you have an interest rate rising over to 9%, which is still a single digit, you know, interest rate. Now, localizing, you know, developing 5 million connections is a huge task. Part of the objectives of the program of connecting 5 million connections is also to develop 250,000 jobs, which we expect to come, part of a lot of which should come from the, you know, assembling and manufacturing of, you know, solar value chain in Nigeria. The program, because it is difficult, it's going to be difficult for us to, from the beginning, immediately go into servicing the demand of 5 million connections by fully assembled or manufactured systems in Nigeria. It is taking a phased approach, just like you've seen in the presentation by Hadley and a colleague. And that's because we want to accelerate deployment while, you know, developing the local value chain. And that is why in the applications, companies are submitting to, you know, access for funding, whether you're a downstream or an upstream company, that is mini-grid solar home systems or manufacturer, you have to show your localization plan, you know, as part of the key component of your application, so that we ensure that after, you know, the first phase, you're able to set up a local assembly or partner with a local manufacturer. So interest rate of 9%, 10 years tenure, 2 years moratorium, of course, supporting local companies in establishing this. I hope I'm able to put together all the response that
yes.
is required.
Thank you, Suleiman. I'm sure I would have time to come back to you later. Thank you so much. My next question will be directed at Grace, a friend from the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office. Through the Manufacture Africa program, FCDO is providing transaction support to companies that are relocating or scaling up local components of their value chain. Question is, what are the financial needs of these companies and how do they differ from that or those of downstream players?
So thanks so much for the question and thanks for having me on the panel today. It's wonderful to be here. So when Manufacturing Africa kicked off in Nigeria last year, we began focusing on solar assembly and manufacturing right away because we really wanted to support the 5 million solar home system target, and because it's really exciting to see what's being done already in terms of local production and the potential out there as well as the manifold benefits in terms of economic development and job creation that localization offers, and the support it can offer to downstream companies. I think given the nascency of the industry, what firms really need is they need support in terms of finance, and that will be different and will look different from what we see in the downstream industry, but they also need a broader enabling environment as well. So I'll expand on that. So in terms of finance, our program works to help these firms attract investment, but they also need working capital and credit guarantees. And we've met with firms with a high rate of demand and pretty high profit margins who couldn't access capital at an affordable rate. And this is where I think we need local financial institutions to step up. And by that, I mean getting to know the industry so it's demystified and de-risked to some extent. Because we've heard so often that these firms are struggling to access capital, especially when they're starting out. Even some of the financial support programs designed for the industry have eligibility criteria that are unrealistic. So, for example, having offtake agreements right away. And DFIs often have a ticket size which is much too large for these firms, whereas they might actually serve downstream firms, they don't serve upstream firms. I mean, what we've heard from the market is that once they envisage the market growing and the manufacturing and assembly sector growing, they think access to capital will be easier. But right now, they really need support in terms of working capital and credit guarantee. And I think that's kind of primarily what we see in terms of finance. But I think it's not all about finance, and that was what was pointed to in the model that SEforALL shared. Some of the other things that firms really need, especially non-local firms, is transparency in the regulatory environment. It can be quite off-putting when rules around local content or technical specifications for products are unclear. And they also, when the rules seem inflexible. So firms are going to want to innovate and customize their products to meet the needs of the different segments of customers in the solar market. And so the regulation needs to remain more flexible. Firms also need to feel that the certification process is also clear. Right now, a lot of firms feel they're being undercut by firms who aren't certified and don't meet the high international standards that we really want to see in the market. So those certifications need to be clear and enforced. Similar to them, but some of the issues I think are similar to the downstream investors. So they also suffer with issues around customs and importing, the lengthy and expensive clearance processes, which can take upward of 3 months, as well as the varying different tariff levels on the solar inputs, because these can raise costs for firms and make it really difficult to plan financially. I think, as with many manufacturing and assembly processes in Nigeria, power is one of the key issues. So lack of reliability and cost. We have seen creative solutions from firms. So one firm is producing their own solar power to run their production line, which is fantastic, but it can be a big discouragement to investment. We see a lot of opportunity, and indeed the program Manufacturing Africa is looking to support successful industrial parks and enterprise zones where power is less constrained. Finally, I'd also point to homegrown skills, which will be essential. Given the nascency of the industry, there isn't a pool of skilled workers that firms can draw on. And so many are having to create their own quite expensive in-house training programs. But this also does provide an opportunity as well. It creates opportunity to make sure that there's gender parity at the very start in this sector in terms of employment. And it's something that our program has been encouraging very much. I think to conclude, I'd say that localization really can work, and the needs are ecosystems based. Programs like ours in terms of financing and other donors in terms of financing will be critical, but there needs to be support on all of these pain points from the government, as well as a broad coordination in this area. We just need a few firms to succeed and serve as proof points for the industry to prove it's viable.
Thank you very much, Grace. Thank you. Much appreciated. My next question would be directed at Mohammed. Key to success in this regard would be how to create catalysts, how to catalyze the process. So from the World Bank perspective, how is the NEP program contributing to the Solar Naija objectives?
Thank you very much, Frank. I'm actually tempted to suggest that the Solar Power Naija is actually contributing to NEP rather than the other way around, probably because I'm biased as one of the team leaders of NEP. But I do agree that the two programs are highly complementary. So just for a bit of context, the World Bank has been involved in the Nigeria power sector for decades. But in 2016, we engaged on helping the government to create the first off-grid electrification project here to be funded by the World Bank. And this coincided with a time when the government was pivoting its focus from grid extension to off-grid electrification. And so NEP was created to provide, to facilitate private sector deployment of off-grid solutions across the country. NEP offers grants to qualified developers to fund their investments and allow them to scale up. This grant funding enables both the scaled up deployment as well as improves the affordability, as explained in the previous presentation. Being part of NEP means that the developers have been vetted rigorously for competence and capacity, and they're also going to be part of a strict monitoring and evaluation process. Solar Power Naija will be providing low-cost loans to these private sector developers, and this will help to speed up the deployment and to meet the very ambitious targets that have been described. One thing I'd like to emphasize is that NEP has been in place for since 2019 officially, and has been demonstrating results. It has also created the necessary foundation for Solar Power Naija to be built upon. And I'd like to emphasize the complementarity of the two programs and to see that we will be working together and to be achieving the same objective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. My next question will go to Chooks. Your company, Oxeno, is one of the first companies producing solar panels locally. And we really would be interested in getting your perspective because you have your feet to the fire. What has been the government's commitment under the Solar Power Naija program? What does that program mean to you? How has it impacted your business and your programs?
Okay, all right, Frank, thank you so much for the question, and thank you to SEforALL for this opportunity. All right, so the Solar Power Naija, is an amazing program. And I will say that in my several years of being in this sector, I've not seen one single program from the government, that was geared towards driving localization. Because a lot of times we may argue about different sides of it, but everyone that understands economics, we know that until we begin to make a lot more things for ourselves, we're not going to see, the kind of economic growth that we want to see. And part of the reasons why our currency is always under pressure is primarily because we want a lot more things. So the program is very exciting, to be honest, because it seems as though, one, they put a lot of thought into it, into the thinking, the planning, and it seems as though all the challenges that we've been talking about for several years, was, galvanized into this one program. It talked about concessionary debt financing and financing that is patient. Because this is the first time I'm hearing of a 10-year, debt financing in Nigeria. Talked about the import duty waiver, and then the other one that is also very exciting is the access to CBN import window for distant forests. Because the past few years we've had a lot of challenges with access to forests. So everybody who's on this call may tell you that may be one of the most critical challenge. If you ask me to take one out of the three, I'll take that FX first, maybe followed by the import waiver. Because getting forests from the parallel market adds a good chunk to the final cost. That the end is going to get the products at. So it's a very exciting program. It's a very exciting program because in the past few months when this program was launched, I must tell you that I've seen a lot of excitement in the market. I've seen a lot of interest. A lot of calls. I'm not sure I've seen people ask me questions about local assembling, in the past, 3 to 4 months, like I've seen in the past 3 or 4 years I've been doing this. So right. Suddenly there is that excitement about it. And one thing I can say, if this program is well implemented as it is on paper, the next 2-3 years will be the most exciting time for players in this sector.
Thank you, Chooks. So I hope I can have the opportunity later just to ask you to give us some specific ways in which your business has already been impacted beyond the questions and the hope and the the feelings about the good plans. Hopefully we'll come back. Let me address Yewande. From your perspective, Yewande, as an investor, where does Solar, your company, see the biggest opportunity for scale in the Nigerian market today? Where is the opportunity for scale today?
Good afternoon. Thank you for the question. Okay, so Solar is an investor and developer in off-grid clean energy projects in Nigeria, focusing obviously on trying to serve unserved and underserved MSMEs in market clusters. Through our investments to date, we've impacted close to about 10,000 SMEs. And obviously programs such as the REA's Energizing Economies Initiative, which focuses on rapid deployment, have identified a potential 10,000 mini grids to economic clusters, so markets, industrial clusters, shopping complexes. So we operate in this space and we believe that there's an opportunity to scale in our delivery of power to the masses through the development of mini grids and or the deployment of solar home systems. Solar already has an immediate pipeline to deliver power to 13 market clusters and impacting over 23,000 SMEs. For developers like us, who are passionate about helping the federal government achieve its 30-30-30 electricity vision of 30 gigawatts of electricity, contributions coming from renewable energy by 2030, we require an enabling environment that allows us to operate efficiently and effectively and gaining even more operational excellence as we expand energy access. The cost of solar, as Ms. Damilola Gumbi mentioned, has fallen everywhere else in the world, but is not the case in Nigeria and indeed Africa. And there are a number of factors contributing to this. As such, we have to find ways to ensure that we can deliver these viable energy access projects. Indeed, a critical success factor to scaling is in quickly determining the right energy solution for the particular cluster, ensuring that a mini grid investment is not undertaken where an SHS solution is sufficient and vice versa. Additionally, collaborations with the distribution companies in underserved areas can be explored where it makes sense to do so for the ultimate benefit of the consumers. However, a straightforward and non-lengthy application process would make this more attractive for both parties. So where are we now and where do we want to be? I would like to see more support from local banks in funding renewable energy projects, which have demonstrated viability and already undergone rigorous due diligence processes and have been approved by programs such as the World Bank-backed REA, NEP, mini-grid, and SHS programs. Developers should be able to access such finance quicker, which speeds up equipment procurement and or the setup of local production and assembly plants, which aids rapid delivery of energy access projects. At present, I'm aware of only one bank which has actually disbursed funds for renewable energy projects in Nigeria that has impacted economic clusters. Then much needed.
I think I'd like to, well, if you want to just conclude so I can move on.
Yes. So we're just going to touch on much needed fiscal incentives. So items such as, exemptions from VAT and import duty waivers at present. We all have localization plans, all the developers, but for us to meet the energy access projects right now, we would need these waivers in place to allow us to bring in goods quickly to deploy to projects that we have on ground.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's important because Damilola was talking about let's move from small bits to big sizes. Let's do the millions. Let's excite the market and excite the people through these big impact projects. I'm sure we'll get there. My next question will be to Shagun. Rural Spark has a very ambitious plan to localize virtually all of its production to Nigeria over the next few years. What an ambition. The question is, for you, what will be the critical success factors to make that happen?
Thanks, Frank, and thank you everyone for having me here. I feel this is a new phase for the whole industry, and such massive targets have never been seen before. So finally, companies can think of taking advantage of economies of scale, and that too in one country. We at Rural Spark, we see ourselves more to be an ecosystem creator alongside being a technology provider. We innovate from the ideas phase to the final product while keeping in mind the ease of manufacturing, which has always been the core of our design approach. So in this localization plan, we are aiming to put up a model in the country together, which can possibly be replicated by other players also very easily. So maybe also a few industry players aligning in such efforts can also speed up the process. Local capacities have to be built up to have a better control on supply chain. And with the program, I think it's a perfect boost and incentive to make Nigeria as the base for West African requirements. We aim that with this localization plan coming to reality, we will be able to use Nigeria as a source of supplies for the surrounding countries. The process obviously requires a lot of investment, both in terms of time and money, and access to patient capital will be the key. We see this as a phased approach. Already quite a few pieces of the puzzle are available and existing within the country. The idea is to work with these players and to put a suitable solution together by doing a technology transfer and bringing in the global best practices. We are already in touch with the manufacturing partners in Asia and who are ready and to put up assembly lines to have a complete assembly of SHS units very soon within the country itself. So overall, this has to be done in a very inclusive way, I would say. We see that critical components like batteries are still to be imported till we don't see recognized sources which come up locally within the country. But also besides the localization happening on the hardware front, I think unit economics have to be looked for in the whole value chain, because eventually now investors will be asking for return on investment. If we are asking for money from the investors, then we need to talk about ROI to them as well. And Nigeria already has been quite at the forefront of the fintech development within the continent. So we see that a lot of Nigerian companies should also see this as a great opportunity to develop some in-country solutions which can reduce the dependence on the global SaaS providers. We are also working very closely with our distribution partners within Nigeria to see how we can achieve that in the most frugal way. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much. Now we have a number of questions coming in from a distinguished audience. One question is about what the prospects are for financial viability of mini grids in Nigeria without grants from donor agencies and multilateral agencies. This question can be taken by anyone. I mean, if you want to have a first go, Shagun, you can do that. What's the prospect for financial viability of mini grids without access to a donor fund?
I'm probably not the you can say so, the sector expert on mini grids, because my expertise lies on SHS. But yes, we always keep drawing comparisons, and we have seen historically most of the most of the mini grids which have come up, they have been successful, so to say, purely because of there was support available. And I think Yuanda already touched upon that point, that having overcapacity, so where things can be done with SHS and mini grids being put up, and vice versa. I think that has to be the approach which has to be done very, very critically. If you have communities which can take an offtake of 200 households, which can absorb the complete consumption, complete production of the mini grid, only then those mini grids have to come up. Otherwise, distributed microgrids or SHS are the way forward. So yeah.
Thank you very much. Is there any other of my panelists who wants to add to that before I take the next question?
Yes. Can I?
Prospects of viability of mini grids in Nigeria.
Yes, I think for us, it's just understanding what we found is understanding who the ultimate consumer is, their ability to pay, and doing the constant community engagement so that they know what the responsibilities are from your part and what you expect them to deliver as well, per whatever collaboration agreement you have in place is very, very key. And obviously understanding what your tariff is, your proposed tariff, and then putting that all together into your financial model will quickly tell you whether a project is viable or not viable, and if you need to walk away. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, my next question is going to come to you, Yewande. What plans are in place for those who may be importing now to begin to localize the materials that they currently import? And how can that be accelerated?
So I think, programs like Solar Naija Power, the solar program, as well as the 5 billion connections, they stress a lot about localization for every developer, wherever you are in the chain. And I think that's great. I don't think any developer would want to sit back and say, we just want to keep importing, because that doesn't serve your economic growth. It doesn't do anything for job creation. So everybody is expected as part of the program submission, the documentation to show what their localization plan is. Whether you want whether you want to do, start like TUCs, doing solar panels, or you want to focus on assembly of solar home systems, whatever it is that your comfort zone is, or whatever you want to go into, you need to be able to detail that and how that will impact jobs ultimately. My only thing I would add to that is how that's going to be phased. Developers are at different phases. So it's just very key to understand where you are in your business and what timeline you're working to, and whether that's acceptable as part of the your submissions for the program to qualify. Thank you.
Thank you. Suleiman, we have a question from the audience. Precisely from
it's fine.
Precisely from Mrs. Adebajo, and she's asking, how does the plan for 5 million home solar systems, how does that plan compare with the current availability today? And I'm sure this question is aimed at just trying to scope how realistic the targets are. Suleiman.
Thank you very much, Frank. Like I mentioned earlier, 5 million is a huge target, very ambitious, with a funding of 140 billion. And if we look at the electrification gap of, if you take some of the statistics, about 80 million people, you can begin to understand the amount of, gap that you need to fill out, and how much 5 million connections, what 5 million connections is going to get us to. But the idea here is to catalyze the market, to be able to allow, for example, the program to address one of the questions that was asked here was, how do we ensure that, for example, mini grids would be commercially viable without any kind of grants, for example. So this program is sort of designed to be able to pave that way from, relying on grants, moving towards debt financing, and then hopefully getting to a stage where mini grids or solar home systems are get to a stage where they are commercially viable. Of course, the gap is very huge. The aim of this program is, if you're able to catalyze 5 million connections, then hopefully in the next 3 or 5 years, you're able to do, based on the income and the benefits the companies have gotten from that program, they're able to expand and do more, hopefully in 3 folds. That could translate to another 15 million. And in 10 years, hopefully do up to 30 to 35 million. So this program is hoping to catalyze that and to get the market to a stage where it becomes independent of any grant or all the support that is required. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted also for you to help us provide, if that is available, some data. How many SHS do we have operational today in Nigeria? So we can see from where we are leading to an additional 5 million.
So under the solar, so the Nigeria Electrification project and the Rural Electrification Fund, these are 2 programs that have been managed by the REA as well. We have deployed about 200,000 units of solar home systems across the country. This is, of course, outside, the systems that are not receiving any grants as part of within the program, and companies that are deploying these systems individually without necessarily being part of the program. And that's the statistics that we have that we can rely on for now. And that's because the programs is very, very specific about the quality of product that goes into the market. It has to be Lighting Global certified and or IEC certified. Of course, when you talk about the entire country, I don't have that figure, to be honest with you.
Thank you, Suleiman. Our friend Olu, who is Executive Director at FCMB, wants to know, and this question I will direct it to Chooks. How do we ensure that we move from mere assembly to actual manufacturing, given the size of the market in Nigeria, 85 million people still unserved or not connected to electricity? How do we move from mere assembly to actual manufacturing so we don't trap ourselves in the Pujo syndrome?
Okay, all right, thank you so much. Okay, that's very simple. One of the things that people must understand is that, if I take it as having 3 segments, the upstream, the midstream, and the downstream, so let's say the assembling is the midstream. Now, most times, if you don't have a lot of aggregation in the midstream, it won't make financial sense to invest in the upstream. So even if I have all the money, why won't I set up a factory where I make solar cells? Because if Oxana Solar is only off-taker, it may not make financial sense for me. So, but I also believe that through targeted programs like this, if there is aggregation of players in the midstream, where a lot of people are beginning to assemble these things, then it will begin to make some sense, for some people to begin to invest in the upstream. If you study most countries, even like this in China, so what happened is that the government invested more in the upstream because the upstream is far more risky and far more capital intensive. So when they invest in the upstream, it makes it a lot easier for more people to aggregate in the midstream. But what I'm saying is that you cannot jumpstart from downstream to upstream. No private funds will be used for that, except you have government, government funds, because it tests the water. It tests this bit by bit, so, that is what I have to answer to that.
Well, thank you. Let me go to Grace and ask, the support for relocating manufacturing to Nigeria, how do you measure impact? And what, in your view, will be key indices of impact?
So I think we have to set our stall by the government. So I think one of the key targets they set is around the job creation piece. So they have 250,000 jobs to be created. So I think that's going to be one of the key impacts. I think price as well, seeing price lower over the course, shifting from assembly to manufacturing would also be one of the key metrics that we see as success. I think qualitative data as well will be really important. So hearing back from firms that they find it easier to set up here and they find it easier to buy here would also be really, really important. So I think the metrics will depend on each agency, the government, us. We have our own metrics which are focused on development impact. So ours include things around ensuring that there's gender parity in the jobs market and in the employment that we're creating as well. So it depends on what you're trying to achieve. But I think the ultimate goal is meeting that 5 million solar homes target and meeting the government's commitment to 250,000 jobs.
Thank you very much. Now, given the team that we are, that is the core of our conversation today, let me ask, and this anyone can jump in and provide a response for this. If we were to emphasize the comparative advantage of producing solar in Nigeria, how do we quickly get to price equalization? How do we achieve that low price that we are all talking about, given the key finding in the report that was published earlier? There were a number of elements that help push the price so high. How do we accelerate that push towards, price competitiveness while manufacturing locally in Nigeria?
Frank,
okay,
I can.
Okay.
Looks, you want to take it up? Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So let me go first. Mr. Frank, that is very simple, and I'll give you some, some quick distinct figures. Please. So if Oxano Solar, if we have an import waiver that works, so that would take 5% import duty and then 7.5% VAT. That is 12.5% off my cost.
Yes.
If I have cheaper access to finance, so instead of me borrowing money at 28%, 30%, if I get funds at 9%, you know how many percent that takes off me? I saw the report, but I can tell you that if those enablers are activated, you can get close to 40% off your cost. Many times, we think that what they are doing in China is complicated. It's not complicated. What Chinese are is they are hardworking, but they have a government that is committed to seeing them grow. Nigerians are hardworking too. So like Oxano Solar, we've demonstrated over the years without any government support that this can work. So government support is coming now. We've not, it's on paper still for us. So what we're saying is this, what I'm saying is that if we can make this, if we can sustain this company for this years without government support, with government support, we can match any price. I was telling you one day the other time is that most times, even on pricing, people think we're expensive. No, give me a call, tell me you want 2,000 solar panels and see what price I'll give you. Yeah, it's all about the economic of this in scale. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. If you're listening, give Chooks a call and he will match your price. Let me take one or two more responses here because there were quite a number of people who offered to answer this question. How do we accelerate the push to price competitiveness while manufacturing locally in Nigeria? Shagun or Wakil?
Yeah, I personally feel the new program which has been introduced by the government, it has all the right ingredients actually. If actually this does see the day of light, I don't think we should have any concerns. Import tariff reduction, import tariff waivers are being talked about, speedy clearances at the port is being talked about. And if all these things actually happen on the ground, then we know the market exists. So why would anyone who is selling SHS or installing mini grids would like to be importing? Because eventually it just reduces so much stress on supply chain as well. You don't have to rely on erratic logistics space right now, which we are currently going through since the pandemic. I personally feel it has been always in chicken egg situation that you always wanted to have the volumes to eventually being able to entice into doing local manufacturing. And I think 5 million solar connection project is the right incentive, which we have now in front of us. And if we cannot do it now, then I think we do not have the right intentions, any of us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, if I may add. Sorry.
Yes, please.
Just very quickly.
I was going to come to you. Let me ask you another question. You can take both together, because we will be closing with this question. I'll be asking you and Yewande to chip in here. Fantastic program on paper. How do we bring it to reality? Suleiman and Yewande. Suleiman, you go first, and then Yewande will close.
Okay, just before I answer that, I just trying to reiterate on what Shagun had mentioned. Some of the key challenges or recommendations that have been made in the presentation around low-cost financing, and the steps that needs to be taken up are things that already exist in the program, and the government, from the government standpoint, this is already happening, and we're working very hard to see that it's been implemented. Your question, yes, it is on paper. The program is on a full implementation stage. On the downstream side, we are very close to our first disbursement. This might happen next week for the first company that has applied, that have gone through the entire financial due diligence, and just like Damilola mentioned, ensure that you have the right documentations. It is happening. On the upstream side, we have a few companies, of course, just to mention, the funding structure for the two windows are not the same. So upstream companies would have to go through the commercial bank, just like we've been engaging with Chooks, trying to set up that relationship as well. While the downstream, the CBN is disbursing directly via a fund manager. So the program is at full implementation, and in the next, hopefully, week or so, we would begin to see our the first disbursement on solar home systems and mini grid, as well as first connections. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yewande, I think it's quite fitting that you are saying the last word.
Yes, so I think, definitely, on paper, it's all great. I know that obviously we have qualified for 2 NEP programs already, and that is a prerequisite to this program. But what I would like to see is that some of the eligibility requirements may not necessarily be as stringent as they are, just to allow more developers to access that funding. I think you'll find that a lot more people will be already doing providing the energy access. So one of the things I want to say, just I'm imploring to maybe look a little bit more at the eligibility criteria and see where certain things can be, I guess, taken away, given that some people have already qualified for existing World Bank backed programs already and gone through that process.
Thank you very much, Yewande. Thank you, Suleiman. Thank you, Grace. Mohammed, thank you, Chooks. I thank you, Shagun. I thank you. We will bring a panel discussion to an end. And at this point, let me again hand over the microphone to Hadley. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Frank, and to all the panelists, really. I mean, this was really interesting to see the viewpoints from all along the value chain. I think many of us on this call were used to these webinars and these events where we're talking purely about electrification and a lot of conversation about downstream side. But I've really enjoyed to bring in this discussion of the upstream and the manufacturing. As Chooks mentioned, this is a conversation that has heated up because of the government's commitment and has really started to bring those conversations together under the Solar Power Naija program. So I want to thank everyone. There are still 275 people on the line at 5:25 on a Friday at Western Africa time and Central Eastern time. So thank you to everyone for your engaged attendance and focus, as well as all your questions. We were trying our best to answer as many as we could, and Frank brought up a lot of the ones that had been asked multiple times. but certainly we didn't get to all of them. So we're going to be working over the next days to try and get answers to the questions. And as I mentioned, also find partners and connect them. That's one of our goals at SEforALL, is to broker those impactful partnerships. And I think there are a lot of people on this call today. There was already an offer from Chooks to give him a call about pricing, and I've seen more in the chat, so we'll make sure to make those connections as well. Really just to thank everyone and to remind you to visit the SEforALL website, where the presentation and the economic model is there. It's available for you to download. If you have any questions on this content, or it's not just myself and Sonloye, but there's a whole team that has been working very, very hard on this, that would be happy to answer your questions as we continue to engage in this work. So send us an email. Again, you can find it on the website. It's PRF, which stands for Policy and Regulatory Frameworks. So PRF@SEforALL.org. So thank you to all the participants, to our high-level speakers at the beginning, the MD of the REA, Vibe, Damilola, and everyone. And with this, I'll wish you all a good evening and have a nice weekend, and to everyone to stay safe. And we look forward to continuing these conversations with you.